Get your things and get out of this house immediately. Don't tell your children anything." The plumber's words still echoed in my ears as I stared out my kitchen window. The morning had started routinely, just like any other. Coffee steamed in my favorite mug, the white porcelain one with little flowers that had belonged to my mother. Sunbeams filtered through the curtains, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. My home was my sanctuary. Every corner held a story, every object a memory. The cream-colored walls I had painted myself 3 years ago, the dark wood furniture inherited from my parents, the family photos decorating the fireplace mantel. Everything seemed perfect, orderly, peaceful. Michael had left early for work as always. My oldest son had a habit of disappearing before dawn and returning after dark. He worked for a construction company. He said, though lately, he seemed more tired and distant than usual. His eyes avoided mine during dinner. He answered in monosyllables when I asked about his day. Linda, my younger daughter, had moved back home 6 months ago, after her divorce. 38 years old and back in the nest, bringing with her 2 suitcases and a sadness that seemed to cling to her skin like a second layer. She spent hours locked in her old room, coming out only for a quick bite before shutting herself away again. She said she needed time to heal to find herself. I understood the pain. I had lost my husband 7 years ago, and for a long time my world had fallen apart. But my children had been there holding me up when I thought I couldn't go on. So when they needed me, I opened my arms and my home without any questions. The routine had become predictable. I'd wake up at 6, make breakfast that no one ate water, the plants clean the house, watch the news, prepare lunch that no one shared with me, read a book and make dinner that we ate in silence. The days blurred into one another like watercolors in the rain. But that morning, something had changed. The upstairs bathroom faucet had started dripping during the night. It wasn't a normal drip, but something strange, as if the water was coming from somewhere it shouldn't. The sound had woken me up several times, an irregular rhythm that wouldn't let me rest. When I came down for breakfast, I noticed a damp spot on the dining room ceiling right below the upstairs bathroom. Water was seeping through, slowly forming a small drop that fell onto the table every few seconds. It was strange because the upstairs bathroom had been renovated just 2 years ago. Michael had insisted on replacing all the plumbing, hiring a full team of workers who were in the house for weeks. I called Michael at work to ask what I should do. His voice sounded tense when he answered, as if I had interrupted something important. "Mom, just call a plumber. I can't leave work right now." "But shouldn't you check the warranty on the renovation? We just had everything fixed recently." No, it's better to call someone new. I'll send you the number of a plumber I know." His answer seemed odd. Why didn't he want us to contact the company that did the original work? But I didn't push it. Michael had been especially irritable lately, and I had learned not to press too hard. Half an hour later, I received a text message with the name and number of Manuela Plumber, who, according to Michael, had excellent references. I dialed immediately. A calm, professional voice answered. "Good morning. This is Manuel. How can I help you?" "I have a leak in my ceiling. It seems to be coming from the upstairs bathroom. Could you come take a look?" "Of course, ma'am. I can be there in an hour. What's your address?" I gave him the details and hung up feeling relieved. At least the problem would be solved soon. I spent the time waiting, cleaning the kitchen, moving furniture that might get wet, and placing containers to catch the drops still falling from the ceiling. Exactly 1 hour later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to a man in his 50s, medium height, with graying hair and kind eyes behind glasses. He wore blue overalls and carried a toolbox that looked like it had seen many years of work. "Mrs. Smith, I'm Manuel the plumber." "Come in, please. The problem is over here." I led him to the dining room and showed him the spot on the ceiling. He looked up, frowned slightly, and nodded. "I'll need to check the upstairs bathroom first, and then I'll have to go down to the basement to look at the main pipes." "Of course. Make yourself at home." Manuel went upstairs with a confident stride, and soon I heard the sound of his tools at work. After a few minutes, he came down with a thoughtful expression. "Ma'am, I need to check the basement. There's direct access from here." "Yes, the door is in the kitchen. Do you need me to come with you?" "That's not necessary. I can handle it myself. This might take a while." I nodded and went back to my chores. but something in his tone had made me nervous. I couldn't say what exactly, but there was a tension in his voice that hadn't been there when he arrived. Manuel disappeared through the basement door, and silence filled the house. I could only hear the metallic sounds of his tools echoing from below, a distant echo that reassured me. At least someone competent was handling the problem. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat in my favorite dining room chair, where I could keep an eye on the damp spot on the ceiling. It had stopped dripping, which was a good sign. Maybe Manuel had already found the source of the problem and was fixing it. I looked at the wall clock. It was 11 in the morning. Linda was still asleep, as was usual for her lately. Since her divorce, her sleep schedule had become completely erratic. Sometimes I'd hear her pacing in her room until the early hours of the morning. Other times she wouldn't leave her room until well into the afternoon. I was worried about her. As a mother, you develop a certain intuition for when something is wrong with your children, no matter how old they are. Linda had lost weight, had dark circles under her eyes, and a paleness that wasn't normal for her. I had suggested she see a doctor, but she always found excuses to put it off. "I'm fine, Mom. I just need time to process everything that happened with Richard," she would say every time I brought it up. But I wasn't convinced. Her ex-husband had been a troubled man. That was true, but Linda seemed to be dealing with something deeper than just the pain of a breakup. The noises from the basement continued for almost an hour. Occasionally, I'd hear Manuel moving around in different areas, dragging something heavy, gently tapping the pipes to test them. He was a meticulous worker. I liked that. Too many professionals these days did rushed, superficial jobs. I decided to make some lunch. Maybe the smell of food would wake Linda up and we could share a meal together like in the old days. I opened the refrigerator and checked what I had. Chicken, fresh vegetables, rice. I could make that stew she loved so much as a child. While chopping onions, I remembered the family Sundays from years ago. My husband would sit on the couch reading the newspaper, Michael would play in the yard with his toy cars, and Linda would help me in the kitchen, standing on a chair to reach the counter. The house was filled with laughter, conversations, life. Now everything was different. Sundays had become silent, almost melancholic. Michael came home late from work, even on weekends, always with some urgent project to attend to. Linda spent the day in her room or went out without saying where she was going. I had gotten used to the loneliness, but that didn't mean I enjoyed it. The sound of footsteps coming up from the basement interrupted my thoughts. Manuel appeared in the kitchen, but something about his appearance had changed. His face had lost its color, and his hands trembled slightly as he closed his toolbox. "Are you finished? Did you find the problem?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. Manuel looked at me strangely, as if he were evaluating something in my face. His eyes darted nervously between my face and the basement door. "Mrs. Smith, I need to talk to you. Can we sit down for a moment?" His tone had changed completely. He no longer sounded like the calm professional who had arrived an hour earlier. There was an urgency in his voice, a tension that immediately put me on alert. "Of course. Is everything all right? Is the leak serious?" "It's not exactly a leak, ma'am." He sat across from me at the kitchen table, placed his tools on the floor, and took off his glasses to clean them nervously. His hands were still shaking. "I don't understand. Then what's causing the dampness?" Manuel was silent for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he looked me directly in the eyes. "Ma'am, do you live here alone?" "No, I live with my 2 children, Michael and Linda. They're both adults, but they've temporarily moved back home." "And they have free access to the basement?" The question seemed strange. "Well, yes, it's their house too. Why do you ask?" Manuel leaned forward, lowering his voice as if someone might be listening. "Mrs. Smith, what I found down there is not a plumbing problem. Someone has installed something in the basement, something that shouldn't be there." My heart started to beat faster. "What kind of thing?" It's complicated to explain, but what I can tell you is that it's not accidental. Someone put it there on purpose, and that someone knows this house very well." I felt as if the floor was moving beneath my feet. "Are you implying that someone broke into my house to install something in my basement?" "No, ma'am. I don't think it was a stranger." His words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. I couldn't fully process what he was implying. I don't understand. What are you trying to tell me? Manuel stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden as if to make sure we were alone. Ma'am, have you noticed any strange symptoms lately? Unusual fatigue, headaches, trouble sleeping? The question took me by surprise. Well, yes, I've been more tired than usual, and I've had some headaches. But I'm an older woman, those things are normal. And your children? Have they shown the same symptoms? I thought for a moment. Now that he mentioned it, I hadn't noticed Michael or Linda complaining of fatigue or headaches. In fact, despite Linda's emotional problems, they both seemed to be in good physical health. No, they seem to be fine, Manuel nodded gravely, as if my answer had confirmed his suspicions. Ma'am, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What I'm about to say will be hard for you to accept, but it's important that you believe me. He came back to the table and sat in front of me, taking my hands in his. His palms were cold and damp. The device I found in your basement is connected to this house's ventilation system. Specifically, it's directed towards your bedroom. My bedroom. What does that mean? It means someone has installed a system to release substances into the air you breathe, substances that could be slowly making you sick. The words seemed to come from far away, as if I were hearing them through a tunnel. They couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen in real life, and definitely not in my house with my family. That's impossible. There must be a mistake. Maybe it's some kind of air purifier installed during the renovation that you don't recognize. Manuel shook his head firmly. Ma'am, I've been a plumber for over 20 years. I've seen all kinds of plumbing ventilation and filtration systems. What's in your basement is not an air purifier. It's something else entirely. I got up from the chair, needing to move to do something with the nervous energy building in my chest. This can't be happening. There must be a logical explanation. There is, Manuel said quietly. Someone in this house wants to harm you. Manuel's words echoed in my head like funeral bells. Someone in this house wants to harm you. I clung to the back of the chair, feeling as if my legs might give out at any moment. No, that's impossible. My children would never hurt me. I raised them, I love them, they love me. You must be mistaken. Manuel stood up slowly with the expression of someone about to deliver devastating news. Mrs. Smith, I understand this is hard to accept, but I need you to come with me to the basement so you can see with your own eyes what I found. I shook my head violently. I don't want to see anything. I want you to leave my house right now. You're crazy if you think I'm going to believe my own children. Please, he interrupted me in a soft but firm voice. Just 5 minutes. If after seeing what I'm about to show you, you still think I'm wrong, I will leave immediately and you will never hear from me again. Something in his tone stopped me. He didn't sound like a madman or someone making up stories. He sounded like a man who had seen something terrible and didn't know how to communicate it without destroying my world. What exactly did you find down there? It's better if you see it for yourself. Words wouldn't do it justice. I glanced towards the stairs leading to the upper floor where Linda was probably still sleeping. Then I looked at the basement door. For 40 years, I had gone down to that basement hundreds of times to do laundry, get Christmas decorations, store things we no longer used. It was a familiar safe space. All right, I said finally, but only for 5 minutes. Manuel nodded and took a flashlight from his toolbox. You're going to need this. The lighting isn't very good in that area. I followed Manuel to the basement door, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. We went down the wooden stairs that creaked under our feet, the same sound I had heard thousands of times before. But now every creak seemed sinister, like a warning. The basement had the familiar smell of dampness and age. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, the washer and dryer in their usual corner. The gardening tools hung neatly. Everything seemed normal. Over here, Manuel whispered, heading towards the farthest corner of the basement behind the furnace. I followed him, my eyes slowly adjusting to the dim light. Manuel turned on his flashlight and aimed it at a section of the wall I rarely visited. At first, I saw nothing unusual. What am I supposed to be looking at? "Look closer behind those pipes." I followed the beam of his flashlight, and then I saw it. Tucked between the normal plumbing pipes was something that definitely didn't belong there. A series of thinner tubes made of what looked like specialized plastic, connected to a metal box the size of a toaster. "What is that? Come closer." I moved in, and Manuel aimed the light directly at the device. Now I could see that it had several compartments. Some contained liquids of different colors. Others had what looked like digital timers with flashing red numbers. "This is connected to your house's ventilation system," Manuel explained in a low voice. "Specifically, these tubes go up and connect to the air ducts that lead directly to your bedroom." I touched one of the tubes with trembling fingers. It was warm, as if it had been running recently. "What kind of liquids are those?" "I'm not a chemist, but from the smell and consistency, I'd say they are substances designed to cause gradual effects on whoever inhales them. Chronic fatigue, a weakened immune system, maybe something more serious over time." My mind refused to fully process what I was seeing. "But this requires technical knowledge, a specialized installation. It's not something you can do in an afternoon." "Exactly. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, and they had unlimited access to your house for as long as it took." I remembered the bathroom renovation from 2 years ago. The workers had been in the house for weeks. Michael had personally supervised the entire project, insisting I not worry about the technical details. "The renovation?" I whispered. "During the bathroom renovation, there were workers here constantly. Who supervised that renovation?" I didn't want to answer. I didn't want my suspicions confirmed with words. "My son Michael. He took care of everything." Manuel nodded gravely. "Ma'am, this system wasn't installed in 2 days. It required planning, purchasing specific materials, and someone with knowledge of ventilation and basic chemistry." Nausea rose in my throat. "Michael works in construction. He would know how to do this." "And his sister?" "Linda studied chemistry in college before she got married." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a horrible, perfect way. The symptoms I had been experiencing for months, the constant fatigue, the headaches, the feeling of weakness I had attributed to my age. Michael's insistence on renovating the bathroom. Linda's sudden return home just as my more serious health problems began. "How long has this system been running?" I asked in a broken voice. Manuel examined the digital timers. "From the wear on the components and the amount of residue in the tubes, I'd say at least 8 or 9 months. 9 months, exactly when I had started to feel constantly sick, exactly when I had started to think that maybe I was developing some age-related illness." "Oh my God," I murmured, leaning against the wall so I wouldn't fall. "Ma'am, there's something else you need to see." Manuel aimed the flashlight at another angle of the device, revealing a small digital screen displaying numbers and graphs. "This system is programmed to gradually increase the concentration of the substances, which means that over time, the effects become more severe." "More severe how?" "Without proper medical treatment and continued exposure, it could be fatal in a few more months." The words hit me like an avalanche. My own children, my own flesh and blood had been trying to kill me slowly. Not in a fit of rage, not out of passion, but in a calculated, systematic way, allowing me to suffer for months before dying. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would they do this?" Manuel turned off the flashlight and gently took my arm to guide me towards the stairs. "That's a question only they can answer. But ma'am, you need to get out of this house immediately." We went up in silence. My legs felt like jelly, my mind was only half functioning. When we reached the kitchen, reality hit me with renewed force. This was my home, my refuge, the place where I had raised my children, where I had mourned my husband's death, where I had planned to spend my final years in peace. And my children had turned it into my torture chamber. "Mrs. Smith," Manuel said firmly, "listen to me very carefully. You need to take only the essentials, get out of this house right now, and not tell your children where you are going." "But I can't just leave. This is my house. They are my children." "Your children are trying to murder you," Manuel said with a harshness that surprised me. "There is no conversation worth having with people who have gone this far." I looked towards the stairs leading to the upper floor. Linda was up there, probably just waking up, planning to come down for lunch. My little Linda, who had been such a sweet child, who had comforted me when her father died, who had cried in my arms when her marriage fell apart. "I can't believe she's involved," I said weakly. "Ma'am, the chemical knowledge needed for this isn't basic. Whoever designed those mixtures knew exactly what effects each substance would have and in what concentrations." Linda had studied chemistry. She had worked in a lab for years before getting married. "I have to talk to them. They have to explain why." Manuel shook his head emphatically. "No, ma'am. Once they know you've discovered their plan, they might do something desperate. You need to get to safety first." The silence in the kitchen became deafening. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, and my own ragged breathing. Manuel watched me with a mixture of compassion and urgency, waiting for me to process the enormity of what I had just discovered. "I need to sit down," I murmured, collapsing into one of the kitchen chairs. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I tried to take a sip of my coffee, but the cup rattled so much the liquid spilled. Manuel came over and gently took the cup from my hands. "Ma'am, I understand this is devastating, but every minute you stay in this house is dangerous." "Dangerous? They're my children, Manuel. I changed their diapers, comforted them during nightmares, helped them with their homework. How could they want to kill me?" My voice broke on the last word. The tears I had been holding back finally burst forth, streaming down my cheeks like rivers of pain. Manuel sat across from me, his expression serious but understanding. "Mrs. Smith, I've seen a lot of things in my line of work. I've been in houses where families keep terrible secrets. What I found downstairs isn't the work of someone who acted on impulse. It's meticulous, planned, and executed by people who have thought of every detail." "But there must be an explanation. Maybe they're being blackmailed or someone is forcing them." "Who could force two adults to install a poisoning system in their own mother's house? And if they were being blackmailed, wouldn't they have come to you for help?" His words had a cruel logic I couldn't refute. I tried to think of anything that could explain the unexplainable, but every line of reasoning crumbled against the physical evidence I had seen with my own eyes. "The money," I whispered suddenly. "It has to be about the money." Manuel leaned forward. "What money?" "When my husband died, he left a considerable life insurance policy. Plus I have a lifetime of savings, and this house, it's worth a lot now that the neighborhood has been gentrified." "How much are we talking about?" "Between the policy, the savings, and the property value, close to $800,000. Manuel nodded gravely. "That's a sum that could motivate desperate people to do terrible things." "But they aren't desperate. Michael has a job. Linda will get money from the divorce." "Are you sure about that? When was the last time you really talked to them about their financial situations?" I thought about that question. The truth was, I hadn't had a deep conversation with either of my children in months. Michael was always busy, tired, or in a bad mood. Linda kept to herself in her room or went out without saying where. "I don't really know how they are financially," I admitted. "I just assumed they were fine because they never asked me for help." "Maybe because they knew they were going to get all your money another way." The sentence hit me like a slap. I felt physically ill imagining my children sitting together planning my death, calculating how long it would take, dividing my possessions before I was even gone. How could they live with me all these months, eat at my table, pretend to love me, knowing what they were doing to me? "I don't know, ma'am, but what I do know is that people capable of this are dangerous, and you need to get away from them now." A noise from upstairs startled me. Footsteps on the second floor. Linda was awake. "Mom?" she called from upstairs. "Who are you talking to?" Manuel and I looked at each other. I could see the tension in his eyes, the urgency to leave before the situation got more complicated. "Tell her I'm the plumber and I'm almost done," Manuel whispered. "It's the plumber, honey. He's fixing the leak," I shouted up, trying to keep my voice normal. "Okay, I'll be down in a minute." Manuel stood up immediately. "Ma'am, we need to go now." "Do you have your important documents somewhere accessible?" "They're in the safe in my bedroom." "Go get them. Take only what's essential. ID, bank papers, some clothes. I'll wait here to make sure your daughter doesn't come down." I stood up on trembling legs. Every step towards the stairs felt like walking off a cliff. I went up trying to be as quiet as possible, though my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard throughout the house. My bedroom looked the same as always. The bed, perfectly made family photos on the nightstand, the closet organized by color. But now I knew that poison was seeping into this space, specifically designed to weaken me until I died. I opened the safe with shaking hands. Inside were my most important documents, my will, the deed to the house insurance policy's bank information. I took everything and stuffed it into a small handbag. Then I went to the closet and grabbed a few basic items of clothing. As I packed, my eyes fell on a photograph on my dresser. It was from last Christmas, just 8 months ago. Michael, Linda, and I were smiling in front of the Christmas tree. Michael had his arm around my shoulders. Linda was giving me a kiss on the cheek. In that photo, they looked like the loving children I thought they were. But now I knew that by then, they had already started poisoning me. Michael had already installed the system, Linda had already calculated the chemical doses. And there they were, smiling, faking love while they carried out my slow death. I took the photograph and put it in my bag. Not because I wanted to remember that moment, but because I needed to remember that the people closest to us can be the most dangerous. I heard voices downstairs. Linda had come down and was talking to Manuel. Her voice sounded normal, almost cheerful, as if she wasn't a murderer chatting with the man who had uncovered her crime. I went down the stairs as quietly as I could. From the bottom step, I could see Linda in the kitchen, dressed in pink pajamas and slippers, her hair messy from sleep. She looked so innocent, so vulnerable. "So the problem was the old pipes after all," she was saying to Manuel. "Exactly," he replied in a professional tone. "It's all fixed now. You shouldn't have any more trouble." What a relief Mom was so worried about that leak. Linda turned and saw me coming down the stairs with my handbag. "Are you going out, Mom?" The question froze me. How could I lie to her? How could I pretend everything was normal when I knew what she had done? "Yes, I have a few errands to run," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you want me to come with you? I don't have any plans today." The offer terrified me. What would happen if I went out with her? Had she planned to do something if she suspected I had discovered their plan? "No, that's not necessary. It's just boring bank stuff." Manuel approached with his toolbox. "Well, Mrs. Smith, my work here is done. You shouldn't have any more problems." I understood it was his way of telling me it was time to go. "How much do I owe you?" I asked, playing along. $60. I took the money from my purse and handed it to him, our eyes meeting for a moment. In his gaze, I saw determination and protection. "Thank you for everything," I said, and the words had a much deeper meaning than Linda could understand. "My pleasure to help, ma'am." Manuel headed for the front door, and I followed, feeling Linda's eyes on us. "Are you sure you don't want me to come, Mom? You look a little pale." I turned to look at her one last time. My younger daughter, the baby I had held in my arms, nursed when she had a fever, comforted during her childhood nightmares. Now I saw her with completely new eyes, and what I saw terrified me. "I'm fine, dear. I'll be back later." "I love you, Mom," she said with a sweet smile. The words that once would have filled my heart with joy now sounded like poison. How could she say she loved me while she was slowly killing me? "I love you too." I lied because I didn't know what else to do. I walked out of the house that had been my home for 40 years, not knowing if I would ever be able to return. Once outside, the fresh air hit my face like a revelation. I hadn't realized how suffocating that environment had become until I escaped it. Manuel walked quickly to his truck parked in front of my house, and I followed him on legs that still trembled. "Get in," he said, opening the passenger door. "We need to get away from here before your daughter suspects anything." I got into the vehicle, clutching my handbag to my chest like a life raft. Manuel started the engine, and we began to drive away from my neighborhood. I looked in the side mirror and saw my house growing smaller in the distance. The house where I had been happy, where I had cried, where I had raised my children, where I had almost died without knowing it. "Where are we going?" I asked in a hoarse voice. "To a safe place where we can think clearly," Manuel replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "There's a coffee shop about 20 blocks from here. We can sit down, talk about the next steps, and call the authorities." "The authorities? You mean the police?" "Yes, ma'am." What we discovered constitutes attempted murder. This isn't something we can handle on our own." The word murder echoed in my head. My children weren't just ungrateful or greedy. They were potential killers. Killers who had been living with me, eating my food, pretending to care about my well-being, while meticulously carrying out my death. "I can't believe this is real," I murmured, staring out the window at the familiar streets that now felt strange and threatening. "I know. It's hard to process. But Mrs. Smith, you made the right decision by leaving that house. What if we're wrong? What if there's an explanation we're not seeing?" Manuel glanced at me briefly before refocusing on the traffic. "Ma'am, I installed ventilation systems for 15 years before becoming a plumber. What I saw in your basement is not a mistake. It's not a misunderstanding. It is a device specifically designed to disperse chemical substances into the air of your room. There is no innocent explanation for that." I knew he was right, but my mind kept desperately searching for an alternate reality where my children weren't monsters. How much time do you think would have passed before it worked? Based on the timers and the concentration, I saw I'd say you had maybe 2 or 3 more months. Your symptoms would have gradually worsened until it looked like a natural illness. You probably would have developed severe respiratory problems, vital organ failure. You would have died slowly and no one would have suspected anything strange. Tears welled up in my eyes again. How can 2 people plan something like that? How can they look their mother in the face every day, fake love while they're killing her? I don't have an answer for that, ma'am. But what I do know is that people capable of this are not going to stop just because you confront them. If they find out you know the truth, they might speed up their plans or try something more direct. The thought terrified me. You think they'll look for me? It depends on how desperate they are for the money and how committed they are to their original plan. We arrived at the coffee shop, a cozy little place with wooden tables and the aroma of fresh coffee. Manuel chose a table in the back, away from the windows and near a rear exit. When I realized he was thinking strategically about escape routes, the reality of my situation hit me again. A young waitress approached our table. "What can I get for you?" "2 coffees, please," said Manuel, "and maybe something sweet for the lady. She's had a rough day." The waitress nodded and walked away. Manuel waited until we were alone before continuing. "Mrs. Smith, we need to talk about your options. The first is to call the police immediately and report what we found." "And what would happen then?" "They would go to your house with a search warrant, examine the device, and arrest your children if they find enough evidence." The idea of seeing Michael and Linda in handcuffs being taken away in a police car turned my stomach. But the alternative was them continuing their plan until they killed me. What's the second option? We could document everything ourselves first, take pictures, get samples of the chemicals, build a solid case before involving the authorities. Would that mean going back to the house? Not necessarily. I could go back under the pretext of checking that the repair worked correctly. I could take photographic evidence of the device. The waitress returned with our coffees and a slice of chocolate cake I hadn't ordered but was grateful for. I needed sugar to process all this information. "But why would you do that for me?" "You don't even know me." Manuel took a sip of his coffee before answering. "Ma'am, I lost my mother 5 years ago. She died of cancer, but for months before her diagnosis, she complained of strange symptoms that doctors couldn't explain. Extreme fatigue, respiratory problems, general weakness. It was only after she died that we discovered my brother had been stealing money from her bank accounts and tampering with her medication. Oh my God. I couldn't save my mother because I didn't see the signs in time. But when I saw what was happening in your house, I knew I had a second chance to do the right thing." His words moved me deeply. Here was a stranger risking his time and possibly his safety to help an elderly woman he had just met that morning. "Was your brother arrested?" "Yes, but not for the physical harm he caused my mother, only for the theft. By the time we found out about the medication, it was too late to prove it contributed to her death." "That's why you want to help me gather solid evidence." "Exactly. I don't want your children to escape the consequences of what they've done." I took a bite of the chocolate cake, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. "I can't believe we're talking about my children like they're criminals." "I know it's difficult, But Mrs. Smith, have you noticed any changes in their behavior over the last few months? I mulled over the question. Michael has become more distant. He avoids long conversations. He's always busy with work or projects. And Linda, since she came back home, has been very withdrawn. But I attributed those changes to their personal circumstances. I thought Michael was stressed from work and that Linda was depressed over her divorce. And you never suspected they might be plotting something together. Never. In fact, I thought it was good that she was home because Michael seemed more relaxed when she was around. Probably because they could better coordinate their activities when they were both in the house. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. The times I went out, they were always home together. They could have been adjusting the device, changing the concentrations, monitoring my symptoms. It's very likely. How could I have been so blind? Because you love them. And when we love someone, we tend to give them the benefit of the doubt, even when the signs are right there. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Linda. Mom, is everything okay? You've been out longer than usual. I showed the message to Manuel. His expression hardened. They're already monitoring your movements. Text her back that you're fine, but you got held up at the bank. I typed the reply. Manuel suggested my fingers trembling on the screen. This means we need to act fast, Manuel said after I sent the message. Once they suspect something is wrong, they could get rid of the device and destroy all the evidence. What do you suggest we do? I'll go back to your house this afternoon. Under the pretext of checking for any additional leaks, I'll take detailed pictures of the device and, if possible, samples of the chemicals. Then we call the police with solid evidence. And in the meantime, where do I stay? Do you have any trusted relatives or friends who live far from here? I thought about my options. My sister lived in another state, but we hadn't spoken in months. I had a few close friends, but involving them in this seemed dangerous. I could stay in a hotel. That might be the safest option for now. Manuel took a card from his wallet and wrote a number on the back. This is my personal number. Call me immediately if your children try to contact you or if you notice anything strange. I took the card, feeling like it was a lifeline in a turbulent ocean. Manuel, what will happen if we find out they really are trying to kill me? How will I live knowing that my own children... One step at a time, ma'am. First, let's make sure you're safe. Then we'll worry about the rest. Manuel drove me to a modest but clean hotel downtown, far from my neighborhood and any place my children might look for me. While he spoke with the receptionist, I sat on one of the lobby armchairs clutching my purse and trying to process that my life had completely changed in a matter of hours. Room 203, Manuel said, handing me the key. It's in my name, so if anyone asks for you, they won't find you. How much should I pay you for this? Don't worry about that now. We have more important things to deal with. We rode the elevator in silence. The room was small but comfortable. A single bed, a desk, a chair, and a window overlooking the main street. Manuel checked the room carefully, making sure the windows had locks and the door had a double bolt. Keep the door locked at all times, he instructed. Don't open it for anyone but me. If you need anything, call room service. When are you going back to my house? In about 2 hours. I'll tell them I got a call from another client complaining of similar issues, and I want to verify that my repair at their house is holding up. They won't suspect anything. It's common practice in my profession to double-check complicated jobs. It shouldn't raise any flags. Manuel headed for the door, but stopped before leaving. Mrs. Smith, there's something I have to ask you. Do you have a will? The question caught me off guard. Yes, why? Are your children the sole beneficiaries? Yes, everything is split evenly between Michael and Linda. Manuel nodded gravely. That confirms the motive. With you out of the way, they would immediately inherit a considerable sum. But the will specifies that if my death is suspicious or the result of a crime, they lose all inheritance rights. They know that. Are you sure we've never discussed the specific details of the will? That could explain why they chose such an elaborate method. If your death appeared natural, the result of a gradual illness, no one would question the will. The calculated coldness of their actions terrified me again. They had not only planned to kill me, but they had planned to do it in a way that guaranteed they would benefit financially from my death. Manuel, what kind of people do this? People who have lost all normal emotional connection, people for whom money has become more important than any family bond. But I raised them to be good people. I taught them values, gave them love, provided them with an education. Sometimes, ma'am, people turn into something completely different from what we expected. Circumstances, pressures, bad decisions can change someone completely. After Manuel left, I was alone in the hotel room. The silence was overwhelming. For decades, I had been used to the constant noise of a full house, the television conversations, footsteps on the stairs, doors opening and closing. Now, in this silent room, my mind finally had space to fully process what I had discovered. I sat on the bed and took out my phone. I had 3 more messages from Linda. "Mom, it's already 4 o'clock. Where are you? Michael is asking for you. He says you're not answering his call. I'm starting to worry. Please answer." Each message sent shivers down my spine. Was she really worried? Or was she starting to suspect that something had gone wrong with their plan? I decided to reply. "Everything's fine, dear. The bank was very crowded, and then I went shopping. I'll be back soon." The reply came immediately. "What did you buy? Do you need me to come pick you up?" Her insistence on knowing exactly where I was and what I was doing now seemed sinister, rather than considerate. "No need. I have a ride. See you at home." She didn't reply immediately, which was strange. Linda usually answered texts instantly. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes, trying to remember signs I had overlooked. When had all this really started? Had there been moments when I should have suspected something? I remembered a conversation from a few months ago. Michael had casually mentioned that he thought I should consider moving to a smaller apartment. "This house is too big for one person, Mom," he had said, "and the upkeep must be expensive." At the time, I thought he was worried about my well-being. Now I realized he might have been assessing the property's value. I also remembered Linda asking strange questions about my finances. "Do you have enough money for your medical expenses as you get older, Mom? Have you thought about what you'll do if you need special care?" I had interpreted these questions as normal filial concern. But now I wondered if she was calculating how much money would be left for them after my medical expenses. My phone rang, startling me. It was Michael. "Hi, Mom. Linda says you've been out all day. Is everything okay?" His voice sounded tense, as if he were holding back some emotion. "Yes, honey. I just had things to do." "What kind of things? It's strange you didn't tell us you'd be out for so long." "Since when do I need to report my movements to my children?" I replied, trying to sound normal, but firm. There was an awkward pause. "You're right. It's just, we worry when you change your routine." "My routine? Well, you're normally home in the afternoons. You make dinner at the same time every day." "Nothing." I realized they had been monitoring my schedule much more closely than I had noticed. It was to make sure I was in my room during the times of highest poison concentration. "I have the right to change my routine occasionally," I said. "Of course. Are you going to be home for dinner?" "I'm not sure. I might eat out tonight." Another pause. "Out with whom?" His tone had become more tense. It was as if the idea of me having an independent social life made him nervous. "With a friend." I lied. "What friend? You haven't mentioned plans with friends in months." His interrogation was making me more and more nervous. Why did he need to know exactly who I was with and where Michael? Why so many questions? I'm a grown woman. "I'm sorry, Mom. It's just, you've been acting a little strange lately." "Strange how?" "More tired, more forgetful. Linda and I have been worried about your health." The irony of his words made me sick. They had caused my fatigue and confusion, and now they were pretending to be concerned about the symptoms they had created. "I'm fine," I said firmly. "Maybe you should see a doctor, as a precaution." "For what?" "To make sure everything is normal. At your age, it's important to have regular checkups." They wanted me to go to a doctor to document my symptoms, to create a medical history that would support the idea that I was developing a natural illness. "I'll consider it," I said, wanting to end the conversation. "Okay, I love you, Mom. Be careful." "I love you too." I lied because the words had become automatic after decades of repeating them. After hanging up, I realized my hands were shaking violently. The conversation had confirmed my worst fears. They were not only poisoning me, but they were carefully monitoring my response to the poison, documenting my symptoms, preparing for the final phase of their plan. I looked at the clock. Manuel had been gone for an hour. I hoped he could get the evidence we needed without raising suspicion. My phone buzzed with another message from Linda. "Michael says you're having dinner out, with which friend we could join you." The idea of being in a restaurant with my 2 children, knowing what I knew now, terrified me. What if they suspected I had discovered their plan? Would they try to do something desperate in public? I didn't answer the message. Instead, I lay on the hotel bed, and for the first time in months, I cried freely. I cried for the betrayal, for the loss of the family I thought I had for the future. I had imagined surrounded by the love of my children. I cried for the naive woman I had been that morning, who believed the biggest problem in her life was a leak in the ceiling. When the tears finally stopped, I realized something had changed in me. The initial shock had given way to a cold determination. My children had chosen to see me as an obstacle to their wealth. Now I had to choose whether I was going to be a victim or a survivor. The phone rang at 6 in the evening. It was Manuel. "Mrs. Smith, I have the evidence. But there's something else you need to know. Can you meet me in the hotel lobby in 10 minutes? What did you find? It's better if we talk in person. And ma'am, prepare yourself for something disturbing." I went down to the lobby with my heart in my throat. Manuel was sitting in the same armchair where I had waited before, but his expression was even more serious than in the morning. He had a folder and a digital camera in his hands. "What happened?" I asked, sitting across from him. "I got detailed pictures of the device," he said, opening the folder. "But while I was documenting everything, I heard your children talking in the kitchen. They stayed there thinking I was in the basement working." He showed me the photographs. They were clear, detailed images of the system I had seen that morning. The tubes, the chemical containers, the digital timers, everything documented from multiple angles. "These photos are solid evidence," he continued. "But what I heard is even more important." "What did you hear?" Manuel leaned forward, lowering his voice, even though we were in a secluded corner of the lobby. "Your son Michael was telling Linda that you had been acting strangely today, that your answers to their questions were evasive." "They already suspected something." "Yes, but there's more. Linda said they needed to speed up the timeline, that they couldn't risk waiting another 2 months. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. "Speed up how?" Michael mentioned something about Plan B. He said they had a second option that would be quicker but riskier. "What kind of Plan B?" They didn't give specifics, but Linda mentioned something about making it look like a household accident, a fire or a fall down the stairs. The implications terrified me. If they could no longer kill me slowly with poison, they were willing to resort to more direct and violent methods. "They also said something about the money," Manuel continued. "Apparently, Michael has gambling debts of almost $100,000, and Linda isn't going to get anything from the divorce because her ex-husband found out she was having an affair." The pieces of the puzzle fell into place horribly. It wasn't just general greed. They were both financially desperate. Gambling debts. Michael owes money to loan sharks who aren't exactly understanding about late payments. Linda mentioned they had been pressuring him, threatening physical violence. And Linda's divorce. Apparently, her ex-husband hired a private investigator who documented her infidelity. Under the divorce laws, that means she gets no financial settlement. Suddenly, it all made a horrible kind of sense. Michael didn't just want my money, he desperately needed it to save his own life. And Linda had lost all hope of financial stability after her divorce. "So they really had no other choice," I murmured. From their perspective, killing me was the only way to solve their problems. "That's what I'm afraid of, and now that they suspect something is wrong, they might act impulsively." Manuel took more photos out of the folder. "But there's something else I found." After they finished talking, they went down to the basement together. They wanted to verify that the device was still working correctly. "You followed them." I hid in a corner and watched them. Mrs. Smith, what I saw, confirmed that this has been going on for months. He showed me a photo of a notebook he had managed to capture from a distance. pages filled with dates, times, and handwritten notes. What is that? A detailed log of your response to the poison. Dates when you seemed more tired, when you complained of headaches, when you had trouble sleeping. They've been documenting everything as if it were a science experiment. The photo showed entries like, March 15th, Mom complained of dizziness after lunch. March 22nd, slept until 10 a.m., very unusual. April 3rd, forgot dentist appointment, mental confusion increasing. They've been monitoring my decline, I whispered, feeling nauseous, and adjusting the doses based on their observations. Look at this entry from last month. He pointed to a line that read, reduce nighttime concentration symptoms too obvious. Michael suggests switching to morning release when she's alone. They were refining the process to make sure no one else noticed what was happening to me. Exactly. But ma'am, there's something even more disturbing. Manuel turned to the next page of photos. It showed a list written in Linda's handwriting. What does it say? It's a list of symptoms they expected you to develop and a timeline for when they planned for each one to appear. And I read the list with growing horror. Weeks 1 to 4, general fatigue attributable to aging. Weeks 5 to 8, memory problems, mild confusion. Weeks 9 to 12, respiratory difficulties, physical weakness. Weeks 13 to 16, severe deterioration, possible hospitalization. Weeks 17 to 20, organ failure, apparently natural death. We're in week 14, Manuel said grimly. According to their timeline, you should already be hospitalized, dying slowly, while doctors tried to figure out what mysterious illness had struck you. But I'm still here, I said, feeling a fierce determination growing in my chest. Their perfect plan failed. Yes, but now they know something went wrong, and desperate people do desperate things. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Michael. Mom, the plumber, came back to check his work. He says everything is perfect. When are you coming home? They already know you're not where you should be, Manuel said, reading the message over my shoulder. And they're starting to panic. What do we do now? We call the police immediately. With these photos and what I heard, we have enough evidence to get them arrested. But before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Linda. Answer it, Manuel said. But be very careful what you say. Mom, where are you? Michael and I are very worried. Her voice sounded different. There was a tension that hadn't been there in previous conversations. I'm fine, dear. Why so worried? It's just... The plumber said something strange when he came to check his work. My heart sped up. What did he say? He mentioned you had been asking about ventilation problems in the basement, but you never mentioned any ventilation problems. Manuel had made up that story as an explanation for exploring the basement, but now it had backfired. I don't remember saying that. I lied. Mom, is there something you're not telling us? Is there a problem with the house that we don't know about? I could hear Michael talking in the background, but I couldn't make out the words. Everything is fine, Linda. It was just a misunderstanding with the plumber. Where are you right now? We can come pick you up. The question sounded like a threat disguised as an offer of help. That's not necessary. I have a ride. But Mom, it's already 7 o'clock. You never stay out this late without letting us know. Linda, I'm an adult. I don't need to ask permission to leave the house. I know, but... There was a pause, and I heard murmurs in the background. Michael wants to talk to you. Before I could protest, Michael's voice replaced Linda's. Mom, you need to come home right now. His tone had changed completely. He was no longer the concerned son. He sounded authoritarian, almost threatening. Excuse me, you said you were running errands at the bank and shopping, but the bank closed at 5 and you haven't bought anything. Where have you really been? I don't have to explain my movements to you, Michael. Yes, you do, especially when you start acting so suspicious and strange. Manuel gestured for me to hang up, but I needed to hear how far they were willing to go. Suspicious of what? The plumber told us you were asking very specific questions about ventilation systems, questions that someone would only ask if they suspected something was wrong. My blood ran cold. They had put the pieces together faster than we expected. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom, come home now. We can talk about this as a family. And what if I don't want to come home? There was a long, charged pause. When Michael spoke again, his voice was ice cold. Then we'll have to come and get you. I hung up the phone with trembling hands. Michael's words echoed in my head like a direct threat. Manuel looked at me with a grave expression. He had heard enough of the conversation to understand that the situation had escalated dangerously. Mrs. Smith, we need to call the police right now. Your children know you've discovered something, and they're willing to take drastic measures to silence you, Manuel said, taking out his own phone. Wait, I said, grabbing his arm. What are we going to tell them, that my children are slowly poisoning me and just threatened me over the phone? It sounds like the paranoid fantasy of an old woman. We have the photos, the physical device in your basement, and I am a witness to the conversation I overheard between them. That's solid evidence. Before he could respond, my phone vibrated again. This time it was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Smith, we know where you are. The President Hotel downtown, room 203. You have 10 minutes to come down to the lobby before we come up to get you. Terror completely paralyzed me. Manuel, look at this. I showed him the message with fingers that shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. How the hell did they find out where I am? Manuel looked around the lobby nervously. Did you tell anyone else where you were? No, nobody. Only you knew. Suddenly I realized. Is your truck registered at the hotel? There could be security cameras that showed us arriving together. It's possible, or maybe they followed my vehicle when I left your house the second time. If they were already suspicious, they might have been watching. Another message arrived, this time from Linda. Mom, we know you're at the President Hotel. We don't want to hurt you, we just want to talk. But if you don't come down voluntarily, Michael is going to come up to your room, and he's very upset right now. They're here, I whispered, looking towards the lobby windows. They're somewhere nearby watching us. Manuel stood up immediately. Let's go. There's a back exit through the hotel restaurant's kitchen. We can get out without being seen. And then what? I can't run forever. They're my children. They know all my favorite places, my friends, my routines. That's why we need the police to arrest them tonight. Once they're in custody, you'll be safe. As we walked quickly towards the back of the hotel, my phone rang again. This time I answered without looking at who it was. Mom, why are you running from us? It was Linda's voice, but it sounded different. There was a coldness in her tone I had never heard before. We just want to protect you. You've been acting very strangely lately, and we're worried about your mental health. My mental health is perfectly fine, Linda. What's not fine is what you two have been doing in my house. There was a long pause. When Linda spoke again, she had dropped all pretense of filial concern. What do you think we've been doing, Mom? I think you two have been trying to kill me slowly to inherit my money, and I think when you realized, I found out you decided to speed up your plans. Those are very serious accusations, Mom. Accusations that might suggest you're suffering from senile paranoia. The way she said senile paranoia made me understand immediately what their defense strategy would be. They would say I was a confused old woman, possibly with early dementia, who had misinterpreted normal situations and developed conspiracy theories about her own children. I'm not confused, Linda. I saw the device in the basement. I saw the tubes connected to my room's ventilation system. I saw the chemicals and the timers. What device, Mom? There's no device in the basement, just normal plumbing and the ventilation system we installed during the renovation. Now I understood why they had insisted so much on me coming home. They had used the hours since my disappearance to dismantle the entire system and eliminate the evidence. Manuel has pictures, I said, glancing at him as we continued moving towards the back exit. Manuel, you mean the plumber, Mom? That man is a complete stranger? Why would you believe him over your own children? Doesn't it seem strange that a plumber you'd never seen before today is suddenly filling your head with paranoid ideas about your family? Her logic was diabolically clever. To any outside observer, it would indeed seem strange that an elderly woman would trust a stranger more than her own children. Michael wants to talk to you, Linda continued. We can sort this out as a family, but only if you stop running and come home. I'm not going back to that house. Then I guess we'll have to bring you back. The line went dead. Manuel and I had reached the hotel's back door. He opened it carefully and looked into the alley. It was empty, except for some trash cans and a stray cat. "My truck is parked 2 blocks from here," Manuel whispered. "If we can get there without being seen, we can go straight to the police station." We started walking quickly down the alley, but when we reached the corner, we saw Manuel's truck, and someone was standing next to it, Michael. We stopped immediately and stepped back into the shadows. Michael had his phone in one hand and what looked like a tire iron in the other. He was looking down the alley, clearly waiting for us. "He knows your vehicle," I whispered. "He must have followed you when you left my house." "We can call the police from here," Manuel said, dialing 911 on his phone. But before he could complete the call, we heard footsteps behind us. We turned and saw Linda blocking our way out of the alley. In her hands, she held something that made my blood run cold, a large syringe filled with a clear liquid. "Hello, Mom," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've been very hard to find." We were trapped between Michael and Linda in a dark alley where no one could see or hear us scream. The syringe in Linda's hands probably contained a concentrated dose of whatever they had been using to poison me gradually, but in an amount that would be fatal in minutes. "Linda, please," I begged. "I'm your mother. I raised you. I love you. How can you do this?" "Love doesn't pay debts, Mom. Love doesn't give me financial stability. Love isn't going to save Michael from the men who want to break his legs over the money he owes." Her reply was delivered with a coldness that made me understand the daughter I had raised no longer existed, or maybe she never really had, and I had simply seen what I wanted to see. "You're going to go to jail," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Manuel has evidence of what you've been doing." "You mean these pictures?" Michael approached from the other end of the alley holding Manuel's camera. "I found them in his truck. Very smart to document everything, but not very smart to leave the evidence in an unlocked vehicle." My heart sank. Without the photos, we had no physical proof of what they had been doing, and by the time the police could get a warrant to search my house, they would have already removed all traces of the device. "Besides," Michael continued, "who's going to believe that 2 successful, respectable children murdered their elderly mother, especially when that mother has been showing obvious signs of mental decline and paranoia in recent months? You had it all planned from the beginning," I murmured, finally understanding the depth of their manipulation. "Of course we did," Linda said, advancing towards us with the syringe. "Did you really think we were stupid enough not to consider all the possibilities? In that moment, when all seemed lost and my children were closing in with deadly intent, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, police sirens approaching fast. Manuel had managed to complete the 911 call before Michael arrived and had activated his phone's location feature. Linda stopped immediately, the syringe still in her hands, but with a look of panic on her face. Michael dropped the tire iron and started walking quickly towards the opposite exit of the alley, but it was too late. 3 police cars appeared simultaneously at both ends of the alley, blocking all escape routes. "Police, put your hands where I can see them," an officer shouted as he got out of his vehicle, his gun drawn. Michael immediately raised his hands, but Linda seemed to be considering using the syringe on me as a last desperate act. Manuel stepped between her and me, spreading his arms protectively. "Miss, slowly drop what's in your hands and step back," ordered a female officer who had approached from the other side. "It's not what it looks like," Linda screamed, but her voice sounded hysterical. "This woman is my mother and she's suffering from dementia. We were trying to take her back home for her own safety." "And that's why you needed a syringe?" the officer asked, approaching cautiously. It's medicine. To calm her down. She's been having violent episodes." But her explanation sounded weak even to her. The officers had seen enough domestic abuse situations to recognize the signs. For the next 30 minutes, while Michael and Linda were handcuffed and read their rights, I sat in the back of an ambulance that had been called to check on my health. Manuel was giving his detailed testimony to a detective showing the photos he had managed to email to his own account before Michael destroyed his camera. "Mrs. Smith," said the lead detective, approaching me after finishing with Manuel, "we need you to come with us to the station to give your full statement. But first, we're going to search your house with a warrant to document any evidence that may still be there." "You won't find anything now," I told him. "They had hours to get rid of everything." "Maybe, but criminals, especially first-timers, often make mistakes in their panic to clean up a scene. Besides, certain types of chemical residues are almost impossible to remove completely." 3 hours later, sitting in an interrogation room, drinking terrible coffee, and giving my testimony for the third time, I received confirmation that the detective was right. They had found traces of the chemicals in my bedroom's ventilation duct's residue in the basement pipes that had been hastily disconnected, and most incriminating of all, the notebook with the detailed log of my symptoms hidden in Linda's room. Apparently, in their rush to dismantle the physical device, they had forgotten to get rid of the written documentation of their experiment. It has been 6 months since that horrible night in the alley. Michael and Linda were arrested and charged with premeditated attempted murder. During the trial, which lasted 3 weeks, the full truth came to light. Michael's gambling debts amounted to $120,000, and the loan sharks had begun to threaten not only him, but also Linda. She had lost everything in her divorce due to her proven infidelity and was facing bankruptcy. Together, they had calculated that my death would give them immediate access to $800,000 in life insurance savings and the value of the property. The slow poisoning method had been Linda's idea. She remembered enough from her chemistry studies to design a mixture that would mimic natural deterioration due to aging. During the trial, neither of them showed any real remorse. Their statements focused on justifying their actions due to financial desperation, as if that somehow lessened the gravity of conspiring to murder their own mother. Michael was sentenced to 25 years in prison, without the possibility of parole, for 15 years. Linda received 20 years with the possibility of parole after 12. Both appealed their sentences, but the appeals were denied. I sold the house where I had lived for 40 years. I couldn't stay in a place where every room reminded me of the betrayal. With the money from the sale, I bought a small apartment in a coastal city 200 miles away, where the ocean air helps to clear away the toxic memories. Manuel became more than the man who saved my life. He became a dear friend. We write to each other weekly, and he visits me every few months. He helped me understand that not everyone in the world is willing to betray trust for money. Some strangers can become true family, while some family can become dangerous strangers. Now, when I sit on my new balcony watching the sunset over the ocean, I reflect on the lessons I learned in the most painful way possible. True love is not based on shared blood, but on genuine actions and mutual care. Real family are the people who protect you when you are vulnerable, not those who take advantage of your vulnerability for their own gain. Sometimes I wonder if there were signs I should have noticed earlier, but I've come to the conclusion that when we trust someone completely, we tend to interpret even suspicious actions in the most benevolent way possible. That is not a character flaw, it is a natural human characteristic that manipulators exploit. And you, dear listeners, do you believe that a small detail can completely change one's destiny? In my case, a simple drip from the ceiling revealed a conspiracy that would have ended my life. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, and the deepest betrayals come from the places we consider safest. Life teaches us that we must remain vigilant without losing the ability to trust, and that we must value people for their actions, not for their blood relationship to us.